The first night, the floor of the rusted trailer didn't just creak, it breathed. A slow, agonizing pulse vibrated up through the thin metal, a desperate rhythm from the packed earth directly beneath her cot, as if the very ground was suffocating. Wait, before the next revelation unfolds, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To ensure you don't miss unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. Ilara dropped the tin mug. The lukewarm water splashed across the warped linoleum, but the sound was lost in the thump, pause, thump from below. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't rats. It was strong. She scrambled back, hitting her head on the flimsy particle board cupboard. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No, this is all I have." This trailer, dragged into the deepest recess of the Blackwood Forest decades ago and abandoned, was her last and only refuge. After Marcus died, the creditors had taken the house, the furniture, even her wedding ring. His estranged, wealthy family in the city had offered her a position as a companion to their gout-ridden matriarch, a gilded cage of pity and whispers. Ilara, the barren widow, the poor girl who had trapped their golden boy. She had taken what little cash she had hidden in a loose-leaf tea tin and fled, buying the derelict trailer for a pittance from a terrified local farmer who refused to set foot on the property. "The ground's sour," he'd muttered, spitting tobacco on the gravel. Sour ground. She'd taken it for superstition. Now, listening to the rhythmic, living impact against the foundation, she knew it was a warning. She grabbed the fireplace poker, the only thing resembling a weapon she owned, and crept toward the center of the small room. The floor was weakest there, a patch of damp rotted plywood covering what looked like an old, crude repair. Thump. She jumped back, stifling a scream. It was weaker this time, followed by a long, scraping sigh, like a bellows emptying. She was alone, miles from the nearest village, with no horse and no hope of rescue. If something was down there, a bear in a sinkhole, a trapped man, she couldn't run. She couldn't afford to run. This was it. "Who's there?" Her voice was a pathetic squeak. Silence. Then a low sound that wasn't a thump, but a voice so dry it sounded like sand on stone. "Water." Ilara froze. It was a man, her terror fractured, replaced by a sudden, sharp practicality. She was a widow, not a monster. She jammed the poker into the rotted wood. It splintered. She knelt, ignoring the damp, and pulled at the boards. They resisted, nails shrieking, before giving way. Beneath them was not a cellar, but packed black earth. It was disturbed, recently dug and replaced. And in the center of the patch, a hand. It was pale, caked in mud, the fingers ending in what looked less like nails and more like chipped obsidian. It twitched. Ilara fell back, bile rising in her throat. This wasn't a rescue. This was a grave. She forced herself to look, using the weak beam of her oil lamp. It wasn't just a hand. It was a man, buried shallowly. He was dressed in rags that might have once been fine leather. His face was turned away, but she could see the edge of a jawline sharp enough to cut, matted with dark hair. He was bound. Thick, dark chains looped around his chest, disappearing into the earth. He wasn't moving. The breathing, the thumping, it had stopped. "Oh God," she breathed. Did I wait too long?" She leaned closer, lamp held high. The metal of the chains wasn't iron. It was dark, almost black, but gleamed with a dull, sickly luster. Silver. A new fear, cold and ancient, settled over her. The villagers had legends about the Blackwood, about the things that hunted in the moonless nights, and the things that were hunted. The man groaned, a raw, desperate sound. His eyes snapped open. They weren't human. Not entirely. The pupils were vast, drowning an iris of burnished gold, and they were fixed on her. He didn't plead. He didn't beg. He commanded, though his voice was barely a rasp. Dig. Ilara's breath hitched. She should have run. She should have screamed. Instead, she found herself staring into the abyss of those golden eyes, seeing not malice, but an agony so profound it had burned past desperation into pure, cold will. You're chained," she whispered stupidly. "The silver," he rasped, his body straining against the bonds. The ground trembled slightly. "It leeches. The moon is high. They buried me to die under the light that should feed me." Her mind reeled. Feed him? Who are you? "The man they failed to kill," he growled. The effort cost him. His eyes fluttered, the predatory light dimming into sheer exhaustion. He will be back, the beta, when he's sure I am dust." Ilara looked at the door of her trailer, then back at the half-buried man. She knew nothing of betas or silver, but she knew betrayal. She knew what it was to be left for dead by those who should have protected you. "If I dig," she said, her voice shaking but gaining a sliver of iron, "what happens then?" His gaze locked with hers, a promise and a threat. "I will be in your debt, and nothing in this forest or beyond it will ever touch you again." He paused, his lips pulling back from teeth that were just a fraction too sharp. "But if you leave me, when Silas returns, he will not let a witness live. You will be buried beside me." It wasn't a proposal. It was a sentence, one way or the other. Ilara looked at the fireplace poker in her hand, then at the small rusted shovel she kept for digging latrines. She had run from a life of servitude, only to be trapped by a dying monster. She picked up the shovel. "The chains," she said, her voice hardening. "What of the chains?" "The links are silver," he breathed, his eyes closing in pain. "But the lock is iron, buried at my feet. Break it. I cannot touch it." She began to dig. The work was hellish. The packed earth was dense, clinging. She was a small woman, softened by a town life she hadn't asked for, and her hands were blistering within minutes. The man, Kalen, he'd finally hissed his name, remained silent, locked in a battle against the poison of the silver. Every shovelful of dirt felt like an act of madness. She was unearthing something ancient, something that belonged to the night and the hunt. The trailer, her flimsy metal shell, felt less like a home and more like a coffin they were now sharing. As she dug, the chains became visible, crisscrossing his body in a grotesque mockery of a shroud. They seemed to hum with a cold energy, and where they touched his skin, they hadn't just burned. They had sunk, the flesh healing around the metal in a desperate, failed attempt to reject it. "He did this," Kalen's voice rumbled, startling her. His eyes were open again, fixed on the ceiling. "My second, Silas, waited until the hunters struck." "Hunters?" Ilara paused, wiping sweat and mud from her brow. "The Argent Hand, fanatics. They use silver, iron, and faith. They wounded me, a poisoned blade. I was weak. Silas, he didn't help me. He bound me, told the pack I had fallen, told them the hunters had taken my body. He buried you alive." "It is the old way," Kalen said, a terrifying coldness in his tone. To deny an alpha the sky is to deny his soul. He wanted me to rot, forgotten, to become part of the sour ground. Ilara shuddered, remembering the farmer's words. She dug faster. Finally, her shovel struck something hard. Iron. It was a massive, ancient-looking padlock, clamping the ends of the silver chains together. It was pitted with rust, but thick as her wrist. "That's it," she said, breathing heavily. "Break it," he commanded. She struck it with the shovel. The iron clanged, but the lock held. She hit it again and again, her arms screaming in protest. The noise was terrible, echoing in the confined space. "It won't break!" she cried, frustration bordering on panic. Kalen's head turned on his earthen pillow. His gaze was so intense it felt physical. "You are a widow," he stated. It wasn't a question. "What?" She froze, shovel raised. "I smell it. Grief and abandonment. You are alone. Use it. Use the rage. You are not a victim kneeling at a grave. You are a survivor. Break it." His words struck something deep and cold inside her. He was right. She thought of Marcus's family, of their thin smiles and cold pity. She thought of the creditors picking over her life like vultures. She thought of the long, silent nights where her grief was so total it felt like a physical weight. She lifted the shovel high, not with her arms, but with her back, with the full, desperate weight of her shattered life. She screamed, a raw, jagged sound, and brought the shovel down on the lock. There was a crack, not of metal, but of rust and time. The lock sprang open. An immediate, violent change ripped through the trailer. The ground heaved. The silver chains, no longer anchored by the iron, hissed like snakes, retracting from Kalen's body. They didn't fall. They fled, striking the walls of the grave before burrowing into the dirt, as if pulled by some unseen force. Kalen roared. It was not a human sound. It was a sound of pure primal release, of agony turned to power. The trailer shook. The lamplight guttered, and in the sudden dark, two gold-burning embers ignited. He rose from the earth like a storm. He was tall, far taller than he had seemed lying down, his body a map of lean, powerful muscle and silver-scarred skin. He stood in the shallow grave, his head bowed, breathing in the damp air of the trailer as if it were the sweetest wine. Ilara was pressed against the far wall, the shovel held uselessly in front of her. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. He looked at her. The feral intensity was gone, banked, but the power remained. It filled the small space, pressing the air from her lungs. "You are Ilara," he said. His voice was no longer a rasp, but a deep, resonant baritone that vibrated in her bones. "You smell of rosemary and sorrow. You freed me." She stammered. He took one step out of the grave. The floorboards groaned. He was weak, poisoned, and buried for what must have been weeks, and yet he moved with a grace that was utterly inhuman. "My debt is acknowledged," he said, moving past her. He ripped the flimsy trailer door from its hinges as if it were paper and stepped out into the night. Ilara watched, paralyzed, as he stood under the high, bright moon. He tilted his head back, and for a moment she thought he would howl. He did not. He simply breathed, and the forest itself seemed to breathe with him. The wind in the pines stilled. The night insects went silent. He turned back, his silhouette blocking the moon. "They will know I am free. The hunters, because their poison failed. Silas, because the earth has rejected his offering. They will come." Come? Here? Panic seized her again. "They will come for me?" he said, his golden eyes finding hers in the dark. "And you, Ilara, are now marked by my scent. You are under my protection, and you are my bait." He stepped back inside, pulling the broken door partially closed. He was too weak to run, too proud to hide. The tiny, rusted trailer was now his fortress, and she, its unwitting jailer. "We wait," he said, sinking to the floor, his back against the wall, those predatory eyes never leaving her. The next few days were a waking nightmare, a tense truce played out in the suffocating confines of the trailer. Kalen was a creature of contradictions. He was dying. The silver, while no longer touching him, had done its work. A deep, agonizing poison was working its way through his system, leaving him prone to bouts of fever that made his skin steam and his teeth chatter. Yet, even in his weakness, he was terrifying. He moved with a coiled energy, every muscle ready to spring. He spoke little, watching Ilara with an unnerving stillness. She, in turn, tried to maintain a semblance of her solitary life. She cooked her meager meals of oatmeal and foraged mushrooms, acutely aware of his gaze following every movement, of his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. "You eat the weed of the forest," he murmured one evening, his voice thick with fever. "They're mushrooms," she retorted, not looking up from the small pan. "And roots, it's all I have." He made a sound of disgust. "He left you with nothing, your mate." Ilara slammed the pan down. "You know nothing of him." "I know he is dead. I know his line is cold. And I know he left you defenseless in a tin box on sour ground. My pack would have starved before letting one of their own fall so low." "I am not one of your pack," she snapped, whirling on him. "And my husband was a good man. He was kind. He wasn't a thing that gets buried in the dirt." The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. Kalen rose from the floor. He didn't rise quickly. He uncoiled until he was towering over her in the cramped space. The air crackled, and the golden light in his eyes burned low and dangerous. "A thing?" he repeated, his voice soft. "You freed a thing, little widow, and now you are trapped with it." He stepped closer. She could feel the heat rolling off his skin, smell the metallic tang of the silver poison, and the sharp, wild scent of pine and musk that clung to him. She pressed back against the counter, her heart hammering. "I am Kalen, the first son of the moon, the alpha of Blackwood," he whispered, leaning in until his face was inches from hers. "And I am dying. The poison Silas used was laced by the hand. It does not just burn, it unmakes." His eyes held hers. She saw the pain now, sharp and terrible, beneath the pride. "If I die," he continued, "Silas wins. The pack is corrupted, and the hunters will burn this forest to kill one poisoned wolf. Your sour ground will become a field of ash, including you." What do you want from me?" she whispered, her anger draining away, replaced by the familiar cold of fear. His gaze dropped to the small, wilting bundle of herbs hanging from a rafter. Rosemary, thyme, and a dark, leafy plant shed mistaken for wild mint. "That," he pointed. "Where did you find it?" "By the creek. Why? It's just herbs for cooking." He shook his head, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "You truly know nothing. Your man, Marcus, what did he do? He was a logger. No, before that, he worked in the city, with his family, in imports, spices, teas, things like that. Kalen's eyes narrowed. Imports? He was a merchant? Yes. Why? He turned away, pacing the small space like a caged panther. That plant, he said, pointing again, it is not mint. It is moon shadow. It does not grow wild here. It is cultivated. It tastes of bitterness and the grave, but it slows the silver. Ilara stared at the plant. Marcus had taught her to pick it. He'd said it kept the meat from turning, that it was an old preservation trick his family used. He knew, she breathed, a dreadful realization dawning. He knew, Kalen affirmed. He brought you to my forest. He left you in a trailer on the very edge of my territory, and he taught you to pick the one herb that could save me. Kalen stopped pacing and faced her. The fever was riding him high, and he swayed, bracing himself against the wall. He wasn't just a logger, Ilara. Your husband was playing a game. A cold dread settled in Ilara's stomach, colder than her grief. Marcus. Kind, gentle Marcus. What had he been involved in? You have to make a tea, Kalen ordered, his voice suddenly strained. He slid down the wall, his body spasming. Boil it, now! It will not cure me, but it will buy me time. Time to heal. Ilara didn't hesitate. She grabbed the kettle, her hands shaking, and began to brew the dark-leafed herb. The trailer filled with a sharp, medicinal scent, like ozone and wet stone. As she worked, a thought burrowed into her mind. Marcus hadn't just died. His wagon had overturned on a clear day, on a flat road. The authorities had called it a freak accident. The horses, spooked by a wolf, they'd said. She looked at Kalen, who was now shivering violently on the floor, his eyes closed in a rictus of pain. Spooked by a wolf? He wasn't running from his family, she whispered to the bubbling kettle. He was running from this. She poured the steaming, dark liquid into her tin mug and knelt beside the shivering Alpha. He was a monster, a predator, the source of the dark legends that haunted these woods. He was also the only thing that stood between her and whatever was coming for them. Drink, she said, lifting the mug to his lips. His eyes opened, and he drank. The moonshadow tea didn't bring peace, it brought clarity. The fever broke, but the poison remained, a serpent coiled in Kalen's blood. The truce, however, shifted. He was no longer just a predator in her space, he was her patient, and she, his reluctant nurse. He began to talk, not in long narratives, but in short, sharp bursts, as if testing the weight of every word. He taught her the laws of the forest. The pack is a body, he explained, his eyes fixed on the tree line visible through the broken door. I am the head. Silas was my right hand. He cut me off, but he is still just a hand. He cannot rule. Then why do they follow him? Ilara asked, mending her torn skirt with rough thread. Fear and lies. He told them the hunters killed me. He offers them safety in cowardice. He will move them from the deep woods closer to the farms, tell them to hunt sheep instead of deer. He will make them pets. The disgust in his voice was palpable. And the hunters? The Argent Hand? Kalen's expression darkened. They are not like you. They are not like him. He nodded toward the small, faded photograph of Marcus she kept on the shelf. They do not seek to understand. They do not seek balance. They seek purity. And to them, purity is a world without us, a world of iron and ash. As he spoke, Ilara felt the walls of her own ignorance crumbling. The world she had known, of creditors and condescending in-laws and the quiet grief of widowhood, was a paper-thin veneer over this other, older world. She began to search the trailer, truly seeing it for the first time. It wasn't just abandoned. It was a cache. Tucked beneath the rotting cot, she found a small, locked wooden box. She didn't need a key. The lock was flimsy, and the fireplace poker made short work of it. Inside was not money or jewelry. It was a journal. Marcus's journal. Her hands trembled as she opened it. His familiar, neat script filled the pages. But it wasn't accounts or descriptions of his import business. It was a bestiary. It was filled with detailed sketches of herbs, maps of the Blackwood, and notes on the moon cycles. And descriptions. Descriptions of Kalen's line, the guardians of the wood, who had been protectors of this land for centuries. Descriptions of the Argent Hand and their sacred mission to cleanse the anomaly. And descriptions of Silas. Silas, the younger son, poisoned by ambition. He seeks the hand. He offers them the Alpha in exchange for dominion. He does not know they will turn on him once the true line is broken. Kalen, watching her, had gone utterly still. "What is it?" "His journal," Ilara whispered, reading aloud. He knew. Marcus knew everything. He was documenting you. He was a spy, Kalen snarled, moving to stand. "No!" Ilara held up the book, her heart pounding. "He wasn't. He was a scholar. He was afraid of you, yes, but he was more afraid of them. Listen." She read another passage, her voice shaking. "The hand believes the Alpha is a monster. They are wrong. He is a balance. If he falls, the forest will die, and the rot will spread." "The rot?" Kalen's voice was sharp. "I don't know." Ilara flipped through the pages. The last entries were hurried, panicked. "Silas moves. He has promised the hand a clean kill. He has promised them, Kalen, bound and poisoned under the moon of the shallow grave. I must intervene. I will use the old routes, move the cache to the trailer. If I fail, the keeper must be shown the way." Ilara looked up, her blood running cold. He calls me the keeper." Kalen stared at her, the gold in his eyes flaring, not with anger, but with a sudden dawning comprehension. "Rosemary and sorrow," he whispered. "You are not a random widow. You are his contingency." He died," Ilara said, tears welling. "His wagon, they said it was a wolf." "Silas," Kalen breathed, and the name was a curse. He wasn't spooked by a wolf. He was hunted by one. By Silas. "Your husband died trying to stop this, trying to warn me." A terrible sound, half sob, half scream, tore from Ilara's throat. The grief she had held at bay for months, the polite, civilized grief of a widow, broke apart, revealing the raw, jagged fury beneath. Marcus hadn't abandoned her. He hadn't left her to rot. He had been murdered. Kalen reached out, his hand hovering over her shoulder, hesitant. He was a creature of fang and claw, an alpha of a brutal pack. He did not know comfort, but he knew vengeance. "He died a warrior's death, Ilara," he said, his voice rough. "He died protecting his pack." Before Ilara could process this, a new sound cut through the forest. Not a howl, not a footstep. A horn. A single, clear, cold note. Kalen was on his feet in an instant, the weakness of the poison vanishing, replaced by pure, cold adrenaline. "The hand," he snarled. "They're here. The Inquisitor." "How do you know?" "That horn. It is silver. It sings only for their master. They found the trailer. But Silas is with them, Kalen finished, his eyes scanning the tree line. He has brought his masters to the slaughter. He thinks me dead or dying. He comes to claim his title with their blessing. Ilara's panic was a living thing, choking her. We have to run. Run? Kalen turned to her, a terrible feral smile on his face. The poison was still in him, a fire in his veins, but the horn blast had given him a focus. He buried me in my own territory. He murdered your mate, and now he brings them to my den. He looked at the journal in her hands. Your husband was a scholar. Does his book tell you how to fight? Ilara's hands flew, turning pages. It was all there. Sketches of the hunter's armor, their weapons, their weaknesses. They fear iron, she read, her voice gaining strength. Cold iron and salt. It blinds their faith. And the silver, it binds them as much as it binds you. They will come in formation, Kalen said, thinking fast. They are disciplined. Silas is not. He is arrogant. He will come first to gloat. The hand will hang back to purify the scene. The trailer, Ilara said, her mind racing. It's tin. It's weak. But it's a trap, a metal box. Kalen looked at her, a new respect dawning in his eyes. What do you propose, Keeper? You are weak. The poison. You cannot fight an entire squad of hunters. I am Alpha, he stated simply. I will not be weak. You don't have to be strong, she said, holding up the journal. You just have to be furious. The journal, Marcus wrote about a counter-ritual, not to cure the poison, but to use it. He called it the Blood Moon's Gambit. It will turn the silver from a poison to a fuel, but it's dangerous. It requires a sacrifice. I will give whatever it takes. It requires my blood, Ilara said, her voice quiet. And his. She pointed to the last page, a name. Kalen read it. His body went rigid. No, not him. It says it requires the blood of the Alpha and the blood of the betrayer. Kalen looked at her, understanding dawning. I cannot fight the hand and Silas at once. You won't have to, Ilara said. She grabbed her fireplace poker. It was pitted, but its tip was heavy, solid iron. You will fight the hand. I will bring you the betrayer. Kalen looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. The small, grieving widow was gone. In her place stood something else, something forged. He will kill you, Kalen said flatly. Hell try, Ilara said, clutching the iron poker. He thinks I'm a defenseless widow. He thinks you're a corpse. Let's not disappoint him. The horn sounded again, closer this time. Kalen put his hand on her shoulder. His touch was not gentle, but it was electric. It was a promise. Do not die, Ilara of the Blackwood. You first, she replied. The forest fell silent, but it was a heavy, listening silence. Ilara moved to the back of the trailer, to the small, rusted-out window. Kalen stood by the broken door, a shadow coiled in the shadows. They waited. Footsteps. Not the light tread of a wolf, but the heavy, measured crunch of boots on gravel. The argent hand. They're here, Ilara whispered. A voice, cold and cultured, cut through the night. The anomaly is contained. The beta assures us it is expiring. We will move in, perform the rite of cleansing, and burn the den. Ilara saw them. 5 figures in dark, heavy coats, their faces obscured by wide-brimmed hats. They carried long pikes, the tips gleaming silver, and lanterns that cast a sterile white light. They moved like surgeons, precise and devoid of passion. Their leader, the Inquisitor, held a book. Wait, a new voice said, "The kill is mine. The final look. It is my right as Alpha." A massive figure stepped out of the trees. He was taller than Kalen, broader, a brute of a man who moved with a swagger. This was Silas. In his hand, he carried a heavy, silver-plated axe. "As you wish, Lord Silas," the Inquisitor said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Settle your animalistic politics. We will wait." Silas laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He strode to the broken trailer door. "Kalen, are you rotting yet, brother? I've come to take your head, a trophy for my new mantle." He kicked the door. It flew inward, crashing against the far wall. Silas stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. Hiding in the dark, like a coward? He saw Ilara. She was huddled in the corner, holding the poker, shaking. She looked pathetic. "Well, what is this?" Silas sneered, his eyes raking over her. "The logger's little mouse. Did Kalen take a pet before he died? A pity. I'd have had some fun with you." "Please," Ilara whimpered, "don't hurt me. He's in the back. He's not moving." Silas grinned, his teeth sharp. "Of course he isn't." He stalked past her, his back to the door, and peered into the darkness of the small sleeping alcove. "Goodbye, Kalen." He raised his axe. "Now," Kalen's voice came, not from the alcove, but from the door. Silas froze. He turned, his eyes wide with disbelief. Kalen was there, framed against the night, his golden eyes burning. He looked weak, feverish, and poised. "Brother," Kalen smiled. It was all teeth. Silas roared in betrayal and charged. At the same instant, Ilara stopped whimpering. She lunged, not at Silas, but past him, grabbing the small cast-iron skillet from the stove. It was heavy. Silas was fast. He saw Kalen as the true threat, twisting to meet his charge. But Ilara's movement registered. He swatted at her dismissively with his free hand. It was the opening she needed. She didn't swing the pan, she swung the poker. She drove the heavy iron tip straight into the back of Silas's knee. The sound of iron punching through muscle and tendon was sickening. Silas screamed, a high, unwolf-like sound, as his leg buckled. His charge faltered. He stumbled, roaring in agony, his arrogance vanishing in a wave of white-hot pain. "The leg!" Ilara screamed at Kalen. "He's crippled!" Kalen didn't hesitate. He didn't fight for honor. He fought for survival. As Silas fell, Kalen was on him. He didn't use a weapon. He used his hands, his fingers digging into the traitor's throat, choking off the pained roar. Outside, the Inquisitor's voice was sharp. "A trap! The anomaly is live! Formation!" Kalen looked at Ilara, his eyes blazing. "The blood! Now!" Silas was gurgling, clawing at Kalen's arms. Ilara grabbed the small ritual knife from Marcus's journal. She sliced her own palm, a sharp, stinging pain, and let her blood drip onto the struggling form of Silas. "Blood of the Keeper," she chanted, the words from the journal coming to her. Then she looked at Kalen. "His blood, Kalen. I need his blood." Kalen's face was a mask of fury. With a terrible final growl, he ripped his claws across Silas's throat. Blood, dark and arterial, sprayed the cabin. Ilara thrust the journal into the spray, soaking the pages. Blood of the betrayer. A violent supernatural surge ripped through the trailer. The air became heavy, tasting of ozone and rust. The silver poison in Kalen's veins ignited. He screamed, arching off the ground. It was not a scream of pain. It was a scream of transformation. His body shimmered. The silver-laced scars on his skin didn't heal. They glowed, burning from within, spreading like molten gold across his entire body. The poison was not gone. It had merged with him. He was no longer just an alpha. He was an avatar of the forest's vengeance. Outside, the hunters charged. "Cleanse it! Cleanse it all!" The first hunter burst through the doorway, his silver-tipped pike aimed at Kalen's heart. Kalen, still on his knees, didn't even look at him. He moved. He was a blur of gold and shadow. He caught the pike mid-thrust. The silver tip hissed as it touched his glowing skin, but it did not burn. It shattered. The hunter stared in disbelief before Kalen's hand closed around his throat and the man's neck snapped with the sound of dry kindling. "The gambit," Ilara whispered, staring in awe. "It worked." Kalen rose to his full height. His wounds were gone, consumed by the golden, silver-laced energy. His eyes were no longer just gold. They were nebulas of moonlight and fury. "Ilara," he commanded, his voice a chord of power. "The salt." The next hunter entered, and the next. They were disciplined, but they were prepared for a wounded beast, not a god. Ilara grabbed the sack of coarse salt she used for preserving. As a hunter lunged at Kalen, she threw a handful into his face. The hunter shrieked. It wasn't the salt that burned him. It was the iron of his own faith, turned against him by the woods magic. He dropped his pike, clawing at his smoking eyes. Kalen dispatched him. It was a melee, brutal and short. Kalen was a storm, the trailer his arena. He was no longer just fighting, he was judging. The argent hand, so pure, so certain, were broken apart by a force they could not comprehend. The Inquisitor stood at the door, his face pale, his book of rites clutched in his hand. He had watched his entire squad be dismantled in seconds. He looked at Kalen, wreathed in silver-gold light. He looked at Silas, dead on the floor. And then he looked at Ilara, who stood amid the carnage, clutching her bloody hand, her eyes fierce. A new covenant," the Inquisitor whispered, his fanaticism cracking. "The flesh has bonded with the curse. Abomination!" "This is not a curse," Kalen rumbled, taking a step toward him. "This is balance." The Inquisitor took one step back. He was a man of faith, but he was not a fool. He saw a power he could not defeat. "This is not over, Keeper," he hissed, his eyes locking on Ilara. "We will return. The world will be cleansed." He turned and vanished into the trees, a ghost retreating from the dawn. The silence that fell was absolute. It was broken only by the sound of Kalen's harsh breathing and the drip, drip, drip of Ilara's blood onto the floorboards. The trailer was a wreck. Bodies lay twisted among the splintered furniture. The floor was slick with the blood of the betrayer and the righteous. Kalen stood in the center of it all. The golden light began to recede, sinking back beneath his skin, leaving the silver scars stark and clean. The fever was gone. The poison was gone. He was whole. He turned to Alara. She was leaning against the wall, her bloody hand pressed to her chest, her body trembling with adrenaline and shock. She had faced down monsters and fanatics and had not broken. He walked to her, his movements still imbued with that lethal grace. He stopped in front of her, close, but not touching. He looked at her bleeding palm. "You are wounded," he said. "It will heal," she replied, her voice hoarse. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. He had his pack back. He had his forest. He had his vengeance. He won. "Silas, he made my pack weak," Kalen said, his voice quiet. "He taught them to fear, to hide, to hunt sheep. I will have to teach them how to be wolves again." Alara nodded, unsure what he wanted. "A wolf pack," he continued, his golden eyes fixed on hers, "cannot be led by a lone alpha. It defies the balance." You will find a new pack," she stammered. "I have a pack," he said. "They are waiting in the trees, terrified, leaderless. They will follow the scent of my victory." He paused. "But I have no beta, no hand." Silas proved that strength without cunning is arrogance, and cunning without loyalty is betrayal. He looked at the journal, still lying on the floor, soaked in blood. "Your mate, he was a scholar. He knew the lore. He knew how to fight." "He was a good man," Alara whispered. "He was a wise man," Kalen corrected, "and he left his wisdom to you." He reached out and very gently took her wounded hand. He wasn't a healer. He wasn't a man of comfort. But he held her hand, his thumb pressing against the cut, stanching the flow. "The ground is sour," he said, "because it was built on a lie, on a shallow grave." He led her to the broken door. The first pale light of dawn was filtering through the pines. The air was cold and clean, washed of the night's horrors. "It is not a trailer," Kalen said, looking at the rusted, ruined structure. "It is an outpost." He turned to her, and for the first time she saw no monster, no alpha, no beast. She saw a partner. "The Argent Hand will return. They will not forget what they saw." "I know," Alara said. "They will come for me, but they will hunt you, Alara. You are the keeper, the one who knows their weakness, the one who turned their poison against them." "I am not afraid," she said. And to her own astonishment, it was true. Kalen knelt. It was not an act of supplication. It was an act of fealty. He was the sword, the shield, the alpha. But she was the mind, the plan, the hand that held the iron. "The pack of the Blackwood needs a head," he said, his voice rumbling, "but it also needs a voice, a keeper of the lore, a hand to guide the claw." He did not offer her safety. He did not offer her love or comfort, or a return to the simple life she had lost. He offered her a war. "Stay," he said. It was not a command, it was a plea. "Stay, and let us be the balance this forest needs." Alara looked down at the great alpha kneeling in the dirt, his hand still clasping hers. She looked at the ruined trailer, her last refuge, now her first fortress. She looked at the forest, dark and deep, her new home. She was no longer the widow. She was no longer the mouse. She squeezed his hand. "We have work to do. We need to rebuild." Kalen rose, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. The moon was gone, but as the sun crested the mountains, it caught the gold in his eyes and the fire in hers. The grave was empty.